Hey, this is Borin Doulos with the Creative Ache Podcast, where we discuss the God-given passion, pain, and purpose for the creative individual. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Creative Ache Podcast. I'm your host, Borin, and I'm very excited to be starting this journey with you. I think there's going to be a lot of exciting episodes to come, but I got to say I'm also just a little bit bewildered. I never thought I'd be doing a podcast, which is probably something that a lot of podcasters say on their very first episode, but sincerely, I never even wanted to do a podcast, and yet here we are. So what I want to do before we get into the meat of this episode is I want to share just a little bit about myself and a little bit about why I created this podcast and how I think it will benefit you. I am a singer. I'm a musician. I'm a songwriter, a composer, and my life really began to click when I found that out at about 12 years old when I picked up a guitar for the first time. It was almost like my whole world went from black and white to full color. Everything just began to make sense. And I knew since around that time exactly why I was made. I knew what I was made for. So I've been on this creative journey consciously for a little while now, but it hasn't really been until recent years that I've wrestled with the Father about questions like, why did he create me this way? Why did he put certain things in me? And how important are they? Is it important that I'm really a creative individual, or is it just kind of a side dish, so to speak, on the main course of life? And recently, I have felt a pretty severe correction, rebuke, and conviction from the Father about how I view creativity in its divine assignment. I believe that if you are a creative individual, if you have that ambition or that ache inside of you to create, there's something in your heart, in your mind, that only you can see, only you can hear, and yet you have this burning desire to put it out into the world for the world to experience. I think this is the podcast for you. If you're a singer, musician, songwriter, if you love to paint, if you like to write stories or write film scripts, if you like to create products to put out into the market, I believe that creativity is not just something that you thought up, or I don't even believe it's something that is necessarily just about you. I believe that creativity was put in you by God for a purpose, and you have that ache for a reason. I am on that journey myself, and because of this conviction, I really felt to create this podcast. I felt that as I searched into the world for answers to some of my internal questions, I didn't find much perspective. I didn't find much insight, and I definitely did not find much conviction in the realm of the divine orchestration behind the creative individual. And that's a really big problem, I think. I think if we gain perspective about why God made us the way that he did, and how only us as these creative individuals can ever fulfill the things that are put inside of us, I think that there's a lot more weight to that than we have given really the Father credit for. So again, if you have that creative ache inside of you, I believe that is for a purpose. And I believe it's not just about what you have. It's not just that thing that you have in you, but it is who you are. It's a part of you, but I think it's better to say it is who you are. So let's dive into that. Who are you? As a creative individual, as a person who is given a unique creative assignment, as unique as the fingerprints on your own fingers, who are you? And I think to answer that question, one would have to say, who made me? And why did they make me this way? So let's look first at who God is. I think that the Bible contains a lot of scriptures to point at to talk about who God is. But I think Genesis 1 is a great place to start. Not just for us to start, but God started there for a reason. And I think that Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 is the best place. And it's not just because that's literally where everything started. But in that first verse, we actually get the very first description about God from God. It's the moment when God, for the first time, says, "This is who I am. This is what I do." And we see it in verse 1. I'm going to read it. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." God choosing to introduce himself that way is incredibly amazing. The first thing God says about himself is that he is creator. He is creative. What he does is create. That is who God is. Now let's look at how he made you. Of course, we see in the creation of man that Yahweh says to the pre-incarnate Son, Jesus, "Let us make human beings in our image to be like us." Now, that's the NLT. Other translations would say in our likeness. I think that's very telling. That word likeness is also applicably used as in the pattern of. So we know from the very first moment that the thought of man was mentioned. This was the pitch, the idea of a new creative expression, that man would inherently be creative. They would be in the image and in the likeness or the pattern of God. And of course, God, the first thing God said about God is that he's creative. So you were created with creativity as part of your nature. We also see that when God blessed man, he told them to be fruitful. Now, most of us interpret that to mean be reproductive, but that's not actually the way that Hebrew word is used throughout the Bible. It's not used in the context of a man and a woman having children. It's actually more about being productive and increasing in your craft. So I don't want to do a big word study today. I love doing those, but just know that word, though it's not wrong to imply that it means for men and women that are married to have children, it's more specifically saying that do the things that are within your nature and do them well. Be productive in them. And again, this context is that man was inherently creative. So we've looked at who God is and we looked at how he made you. And I think a great way to summarize it, this is not the exclusive statement on the reason that you exist, but I think it is good to say that God created you to create things, and he made you to make things. Being creative is part of your nature. It's something you cannot change. Just like an apple tree cannot produce oranges and an orange tree cannot produce apples. Now, an apple tree can end up not producing anything, or it can produce bad apples if something is wrong with it. These are the trees that we would call unfruitful. We don't want to be unfruitful. We don't want to go against our creative nature. We want to do the thing that we're designed to do. We want to be the thing we're designed to be. And again, I think that a great way to summarize that is to say that God created you to create things, and he made you to make things. God gave you creativity to be creative. Now I'd like to look at why you were given what you were given. Oftentimes we refer to our creative tendencies or our skills or talents. We refer to them as, in the Christian world, as gifts. Somebody might say of a singer, she's so gifted, or of a film script writer, he's so gifted. I think that term is inherently selfish. I don't think that we mean for it to be, but I do think that there's a connotation there that is distracting from what the actual purpose of these, quote, giftings are. Our creative nature is inherently relational, right? I mean, even if you think of the story of creation, God created the heavens and the earth, but who was he going to share it with? He put man in charge of everything that he created and even worked them into the design by giving them the ability to assign an identity to the animals. All of this is a relational connection in the creativity. So I think that creativity is inherently relational. And there's sort of two parties involved in that. First, I would say, is the people around you. You were given a gift, talent, or a skill to benefit the people around you. I would say it this way. You were given grace to give a creative gift to the people around you. If you write that film script, if you create that painting, if you write that song, and you only have it locked up in a room where it's just you that has it, only you can watch the film, only you can look at the painting, only you can hear the song, it literally doesn't do any good. But imagine for a moment that you had received something from heaven to express creatively, and you faithfully did that. The people around you are benefiting from something that only could come through you. That song is unique because no one else could have written that song. No one else could have created that drawing or that painting. No one else could have written that poem or that script. And it's not just that it could only come from you, but if it didn't, then it's not benefiting those around you. You have something to offer. You have something to give those around you that can actually put wind beneath their wings, that can give them the courage to face the trial that they're in, that can edify the success that they're enjoying in their lives. And really, I think that if you were to put forward all of the creative potential you have, that is where the true expression of God divinely radiating through the creative individual, that's where that really comes to bear the best fruit. And that fruit is for those around you. Now, it's also, I believe, for your relationship with God the Father himself. You see, beauty and novelty are from God. Again, the Genesis experience, God created everything out of nothing, right? Like, there was nothing, and then he created stuff. So novelty is from God. Beauty is from God, but it's also for our relationship with him. There's a fascinating little tidbit in Exodus chapter 31. I'm not going to read it, but verses 1 through 11 are pretty telling. God's talking to Moses about the tabernacle and how he wants it made, and he tells Moses about these two guys in whom he put the spirit of wisdom or creativity in. These men were tasked with being over everything from creating the tabernacle itself to the Ark of the Covenant, the gold on the lampstands, the incense, the garments that the priests would wear, even the fragrant incense for the holy place. These two men, Bezalel and Aholiab, were given a spirit of wisdom for crafting all of these things. That's art. And not only was it art, but it was art intrinsically involved in the relationship between God and man. Now, just to be clear, we are not living in the same covenant that was coming about in Moses' day. We are in a very different covenant, but the expression, I believe, is the same. And that is that art, creativity, is designed for our relationship with God. God, I believe, in the dance between sovereignty and free will, allows for that relationship to unfold in creativity. Again, think about the animals being named. God created the animals and yet did not determine for the animals what they should be called. Instead, he allowed Adam to name them. There is an element of the relational novelty, the experience of novelty and beauty in the creative arts that God designed to bring us closer to him as we do it. So again, this creative nature of yours was not given to you for you. Now, it is very important to you to do it, right? You have that drive, you have that ambition, and you want to succeed in doing the things that you were made to do. But ultimately, it's for something beyond yourself, and that really adds to the accountability, to the sense of responsibility. And I think we have no farther to look than the parable of the talents, where you have the 3 servants. Their master had given them each a different amount of talents, and we see the 2 had multiplied the master's talents while he was away. But then the one who was given a single talent, he buried his talent in the ground to try to keep it safe. He did not expand on it. He was not fruitful with it. This was a wrong way to treat what he'd been given. He buried it, saying that he was fearful. And this had some very serious consequences between him and his master. His master rewarded the other 2 and gave them rewards that far exceeded the work that they had done. But when the person who was given a certain talent, i.e., creative gift, and was given the responsibility to make it grow, to be fruitful with it, he simply buried it in the ground. And quick note on that, where did we come from as humans, right? God made us, but how did he make us? We are a combination of his breath and the ground. Literally, Adam means from the ground. And in this parable, this servant literally buried his talent in the ground. Out of fear, he hid it. And that, I think, would be the equivalent of saying that we, as creative individuals, have the potential to simply bury that creative nature within us. If we are self-focused, self-centered, we might think that all we're doing is avoiding the potential pain or whatever it is that we're afraid of. But in reality, there's a very serious accountability, a standard that we're going to be held to based on the creative expression that we were given responsibility over. So again, what I'm really hoping to accomplish in sharing all these things is to really get to the bottom of the question of who are you? God, the Creator, made you a certain way. He made you that way for a reason, and he's going to hold you accountable to that reason. Your existence is directly tied to these themes. So in the search for the answer of this question, who are you? I think you also would have to be asking, what are the things that God designed in me? What are the things that he put in me as a creative individual? What is the thing that drives me and motivates me? And what is the thing that I'm going to be held accountable for when all is said and done? You are unique. You are special. There's no one else that has ever been like you, and there will be no one ever to exist that will be like you. And what that means for your creative nature is that it was designed to release something just as unique, and I would say far more powerfully than probably you imagine. I believe that on the inside of you, there is a wealth of heavenly power meant to be expressed through your creative nature. And if you were to be faithful to allow the Father to freely flow through your imagination and express the message that he has, I think you will find a far more fruitful and satisfying life for yourself and a great reward on the other side of eternity. That can be very challenging because I know, at least for myself, I feel like what's in me is kind of scary to think about releasing. You know, just like all of you, I've experienced my fair share of critiques and criticism on the things that I have released. And sometimes, you know, as a musician, I'm told, hey, you can improve on this. And it's something like pitch or rhythm, right? Things that practically I can look at and say, oh yeah, I can refine that skill better. But then sometimes I'm critiqued on the style I chose, the way I sang something, the particular chord structure I chose. And a lot of times those things, they hurt more than they should. When something is critiqued that isn't like a practical thing that you should refine, but it's more or less someone's opinion on what you created, that can be very discouraging and painful. But I really believe that that's par of the course, and that you as a creative individual should not allow those things to determine whether or not you be creative. Most of the great creative people in history, the people who are lauded for, they're famous for what they did, and it was revolutionary in their particular field. They often had, just like you and I, their fair share of trial and criticism. And I think from most of the stories that I've read, there was some really tough criticism out there. I've seen where people like Beethoven, Bach, Tchaikovsky, it seemed like a lot of things were against them. But we don't look at the past and define them based on those obstacles that they had to climb over. In fact, we don't even really recognize them. Instead, we just see these masterful works of art that could have only come from an individual as unique as themselves. And I really believe that for most of us, that potential is there. I'm not saying necessarily the potential for greatness in the eyes of the world, but I am saying that the potency of our creative expression is just on the other side of the fear we have of the critiques of the few. If 1 million people saw your work of art or heard your work of art, you're going to have criticism. But you're also definitely going to have an audience of people who really liked it, who really benefited from it, who could relate to it, if you could just get it out to 1 million people. And I think that would change things a lot for most of us if we would understand that that's just part of it. And that's not even considering, again, the realm of faithfulness to the Father. Sometimes I feel like He might ask us to do things that most people won't like. But if we're faithful, there's going to be a massively impactful reason for it. And not only impactful, but ultimately satisfying to us as a creative individual. One final thought on sort of this question of who are you relates to some of these things I've been saying the past few minutes about criticisms and those obstacles that artists necessarily have to go through. I would say pray and ask the Father to reveal to you. If you were able to take down all of the walls that you've built around yourself, not even just the conscious ones, but the subconscious walls, the boxes that you've set up based on the fears, the desire to please people around you, all these other negative things that might motivate us to hide who we really are. If you were able to remove all of that, what would be in there? What would come out of you? What creativity would be expressed through you? If all of those hindrances were gone, if you were totally free of fear, totally free of shame, totally free of selfish ambition or pride, and all you did was faithfully resonate with the divine creativity put inside of you, if all you did was express it freely, unhindered, what would come out of you? I think that is a great way to find the pinpoint answer to the question of who are you? Now, I want to thank you for listening to this first episode of the Creative Ache podcast. And I really hope that you were ministered to in this first episode. It was kind of a overarching theme, and many of the things that I'm going to discuss in future podcasts are actually going to be deeper dives into some of the aspects that I talked about on this episode. But I hope that you benefited from it, and I hope most of all that you have been inspired to authentically create and express the things that God put inside of you. You were created as a unique individual for a reason. You have an expression, an artistry about you for a purpose. And I hope that you feel a little more free and a little more ambitious and even convicted to be faithful, to be fruitful, and to do the creative work that only you can do. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.